Nasruddin tale. Like I said, everybody knew Nasruddin. He had poor friends, he had rich friends, he had friends all in every town. And one day he was invited to a banquet. He was invited to a magnificent feast. A very wealthy merchant in the town had invited everybody to this beautiful, beautiful feast. And Nasruddin was no exception. Now, Nasruddin had been on a bit of a journey and he'd come back home late, and he knew that if he didn't hurry, he was going to miss the beginning of this banquet. And well, Nasruddin, he liked food and drink. He did not want to miss out on the beginning of this very extravagant party. And so, he rode his donkey all the way to the palace, as fast as he possibly could. And I thought, no, I won't bother to get changed. I'll just go in my travelling clothes. And so, he turned up at the party in just his old travelling cloak, his dusty old slippers. And when he went inside the palace, he was greeted by the servants. And Nasruddin, welcome, it's very nice to see you. Come on in and we'll show you where to sit. And Nasruddin was taken into the hall. This place was amazing. The table was huge, and you could see that everybody was there, right at one end. There was the wealthy merchant with his cronies, dressed in their finest robes, all sitting around eating the most delicious-looking food. Nasruddin noticed, as he went down the table, there at the other end of the table were dressed all the ordinary people sitting there in their ordinary clothes, and Nasruddin was plonked down amongst them. Well, all right, thought Nasruddin, can't be long before the goodies turn up, and he waited and waited and waited, but by the time the plate of hors d'oeuvres had turned up, all the best bits had gone. By the time the tray of mint tea turned up, the tea was cold. Nasruddin waited and waited and waited, but every single thing that came his way, all the best bits had gone. And the conversation down that end of the table, it was so boring. Nasruddin thought, this is no good. And so, when nobody was watching, he snuck out of the banquet hall, jumped on his donkey, and rode all the way home. And when he got home, he put on his finest robe, the robe with the gold and silk embroidery. And he put on his best, cleanest white shirt, the one that had been freshly washed 3 days ago, hung in the wardrobe. And he put on his most magnificent turban, one made with the best Persian silks. And he put on his best, finest leather slippers. Very, very carefully to make sure he didn't get any dust or muck all over his clothes. He made his way back to the palace. And when he went into the palace, the servants came to greet him. Yes, Nasruddin, how wonderful to see you! And they bowed down low, and they took his hand, and they led him to the top of the table. They led him right to the very top of the table, and they seated him down next to the wealthy merchant and his rich, influential friends. And it wasn't long before a beautiful tray of delicacies was brought before him. Magnificent these delicious tasting things were. Nasruddin, he picked up a handful of these delicious tasty morsels and he rubbed them all over his finest robe like this. The merchant stared in amazement, all his wealthy friends, they just pretended not to notice. Well, next came the soup. The soup was delivered. Wonderful smells. It was just like the soup he'd smelled in that town he was in the other day. As soon as it came, he poured it all over his wonderful turban. Down it came all over his beard, all the way down, all over his clothes. Next came the beautiful, delicious sweetmeats that were delivered on a tray. But he scooped them up in his hand and shoved them down inside his sleeves like this. And then he picked some up and he shoved them around his shirt like that. And then, when the Turkish delight turned up, he took off his slippers and he scooped some up and he shoved it into his slippers like this. Got as much as he possibly could, and he put them back on his feet like this. Anything he could find, he grabbed, and he would smear it all over his clothes, and he'd stuff it in his pockets. He'd pick up a cup of tea and pour it on his head and splash it all over his nice shirt until he was completely covered in food. It was all over. It was falling out of place. What a disgusting mess. And the host and his rich, wealthy, and influential friends stared in amazement. They couldn't believe it. What is going on? And the host stood up with a fierce look in his eyes, and he said, "Nasruddin, how dare you disgrace yourself in front of me and my esteemed guests? What do you think you're doing?" Nasruddin looked up with the food and gravy all over his face and the bits of pastry all over his beard and the stuff, and he just wiped it away, and he said, well, I turned up earlier in my old travelling clothes, and I just seemed to be ignored, and nobody seemed interested in me at all, and I certainly didn't get anything nice to eat and drink, so I went away and I got changed, and I just assumed that it was my clothes that were invited to this party, not me. So, another Nasruddin tale for you. So look them up. You'll find them. You might find a book in the library. You might know somebody else who knows some of his tales. So thank you, everybody, for coming along tonight. And thank you for your generous donations. I don't know how much money we've made this evening, but I'm sure it's a nice amount. And going to a very worthy cause, so thank you.